Hello and welcome to our information session on orientation and mobility. My name is Cody. I'm the Faculty Recruitment Officer for Medicine. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders both past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present with us today. So diving right in, a quick overview of what we'll be covering tonight. Dr. Sharon Oberstein will be giving us an in-depth look into the Grad Dip program, all of the wonderful work integrated learning outcomes, components, and of course the career outcomes. And then we'll dive right into a taster lecture from Associate Professor Juno Kim, who teaches into this program. So just some housekeeping before we get started. So we will have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation tonight, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and you can also like questions to upvote them, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. So just to provide a quick introduction to UNSW, if you're not familiar with us, UNSW was founded in 1949 as a technical institution, as there was a gap in the market for scientists and engineers. And that's really important because that houses our foundations in research and really striving for new and innovative outcomes. So fast forward to 2021, we are 60,000 plus students strong and have over 300 degrees. And then we have one central work integrated learning platform, which connects all of our students to our wonderful industry partners, making them job ready from the get-go. So we are a top 50 ranked university globally. We have also taught the most young rich listers in Australia, and we are the #1 institution for startup founders, which makes us the Australia's most employable students. So we produce those right here at UNSW. And we also have 300 plus exchange partners worldwide, giving us a really great and diverse student life. So why UNSW Medicine and Health? Again, we're in the top 50 for the medical school, and the medicine subject is actually ranked in the top 45. And also to note, really specially, the School of Optometry and Vision Science is ranked first in the world for contact lens research, with 2 researchers actually ranked in the top 5 of the world. So that's pretty special. So we're located in Kensington, our main campus, which is on the doorstep to a world-class biomedical precinct, with loads of clinical exposure for all of our students. As well as at UNSW, we have an on-campus optometry clinic, which sees real patients. So we're making a real difference for real people and real clients on a daily basis. So before we dive right in, my colleague Ali is just going to pop a Slido tag for you to quickly fill in some information about more about you, so we can get to know you in the audience and hopefully tailor this session to suit you and how you found us, or where you're at in your journey along the path of orientation and mobility. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage Dr. Sharon Oberstein, who is the Program Director, to jump right into the program.
So as Cody said, my name's Sharon Oberstein, and I'm the Program Director for the Graduate Diploma of Orientation and Mobility here at UNSW Sydney. I'm also an optometrist. In fact, I am an optometrist, not an orientation and mobility specialist. But as an optometrist, I've got a special interest and expertise in low vision and in supporting individuals that are got low vision or are blind. And as a result, that's given me the opportunity to work very closely with orientation and mobility specialists in low vision clinics, as well as I work very closely with the industry stakeholders who support those people who are blind or have low vision. And this is thus being the program director of this program has been a great fit for me. So why UNSW? Well, the one thing you might have found out already is that UNSW is the only place that offers the orientation and mobility specialist training in Australia. And why is the UNSW School of Optometry and Vision Science the perfect fit? So our school mission is advancing vision and eye health in the society through world-class, innovative, and multidisciplinary education and research. So even that mission statement shows why we are a very good fit for providing multidisciplinary eye care professional education. We not only offer undergraduate programs in vision science, but also in optometry, as we've already mentioned, but we also offer postgraduate programs both in research, in vision science, and in optometry. In addition, here at UNSW, we're actually part of a hub with other partners like the Centre for Eye Health and the Brian Holden Vision Institute. And that's why we actually form the perfect place to provide a home for orientation and mobility training. So what is orientation and mobility training? In case you've done a little bit of research, but you don't exactly know what it is, I'm here to tell you a little bit more about it. So orientation and mobility is the practice of enabling people with low vision or who are blind to know where they are so they can get to where they want to go and how they can travel there in a safe manner. But the best way to actually work out what to hear from what an orientation and mobility specialist does in their day and what they love about their job is to hear from orientation and mobility specialists. So we're going to watch a video now from some orientation and mobility specialists that work for Guide Dogs NSW ACT.
What drew me to the role as an orientation and mobility specialist was the human or people side of the role. It's very rewarding to be working with clients to meet their individual goals and needs, but a big part of the role is also collaboration, either internal, externally, to get the best outcomes in our programs.
Truly rewarding to see people go from feeling vulnerable and anxious, and afraid, to feeling confident, moving through space and no longer needing me.
I guess what attracted me to the role of an orientation and mobility specialist was that I felt that it would be fulfilling, a fulfilling role, and that it would contribute to hopefully making a difference to the lives of others with vision impairment. I have had a long career in the finance sector and working with clients, and a brief career in teaching, and I felt that the combination of those skills and experience would work well in a role as an O&M specialist.
Before coming to orientation and mobility, I was working as a teacher, and I was never really quite happy doing that. And when I heard about this profession, I thought, wow, never heard of that. What's that all about? And it seemed to just combine everything I was interested in. A little bit of education, a bit of rehabilitation, psychology, perception, a really fascinating mix of working with people.
Now the best part of my role is the rewarding nature and diversity of our programs. So at Guide Dogs, we run programs that are tailored for the individual so they can access their community as independently as possible, from education settings to their general community and local area, also to their workplace. Another big part of the role I really love is designing, implementing and taking part in group programs to also build the capacity of our clients in places such as Huskisson.
What I've learned in my role as an orientation and mobility specialist over the last 9 years is that with patience, the right approach and time, I can help people, our clients with vision impairment, to learn new skills that can assist them to improve their independence, not only in their mobility, but also to give them their confidence to feel like they want to socially connect and participate more in their community.
Orientation and mobility is a really interesting mix of disciplines. I love working with perception and seeing how people view the world in their own unique way, and not just how they perceive the world, but their reasons and motivation for travel and the character that they bring to their experience. It's always new and fresh, very interesting.
The Guide Dogs logo appears.
Great. So all of those orientation and mobility specialists work for Guide Dogs NSW ACT, and I thought that was a really good way to introduce the profession to you and to see what they say. they explain exactly what they love about their job. So, as I said, they all work for non-profit rehabilitation organisations, specifically guide dogs, and that just is one of the work opportunities, because with this qualification, there's actually, with the growth of funding schemes like the NDIS, there's been a growth for private work in the orientation mobility space. There's always growth for research, which is something we're aiming to develop here at UNSW at the School of Optometry. And there's lots of opportunity overseas. I'm responding to outreach from overseas companies, from overseas industry stakeholders, asking me for orientation and mobility specialists. So there's definitely lots of work there. I did want to stress again that the UNSW Grad Dip is the only place to train orientation and mobility specialists here in Australia, and there's definitely a lack. There's a need in the industry. So that's specifically rural, but there's a need in the industry, and that's what we're aiming to meet. Okay, so what is our course? What are we teaching? So these are the program learning outcomes, and I'd just like to I've highlighted a few points that we deal with. So we definitely have a good look at all the theories of our O&M practice. We look at and teach you the skills and techniques so that you can actually teach somebody else how to be and move around independently. There's a very important aspect of communication and collaboration as you work with other multidisciplinary professions and other health professionals like optometrists, for example. Then it's a whole look at the interventions. What are the different interventions? Different ways, and some of them include canes and walking mobility canes. This course doesn't actually teach you how to train a guide dog, no, but you work with people that do that work. And then, of course, the vital part of our aim, our learning outcome aim, is to create solutions that evolve the profession and keep, there's lots of emerging technology always being coming out in this area. It's amazing. So we really aim to keep up with that, and I hope we are. And ultimately to develop a client-focused service that is both culturally and ethically aware. What does the program look like? So the first important thing that I would like to stress, it is a full-time program, and many people, this is a postgraduate program, so people do come to it where they're working at the moment, but please note that you really do need to be able to give some time. The reason is that there is quite a bit of face-to-face practical hours. So how does it look? What does it look like? It's a year-long program. UNSW is divided into 3 terms: T1, T2, and T3. T1, you have 3 courses, and those 3 courses are the foundation courses. And in fact, you're going to hear from Associate Professor Juno Kim. He's actually going to show you a little bit of what he teaches in one of those courses. So if you don't know anything about eyes, that's fine, but there is quite a lot of work to be doing in learning the foundations of vision. The next section, the next term, is where we start handling some of the practical face-to-face work, and also begin the will work, which is the working integrated learning. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that. We're going to look at a video in 1 minute, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that because we do try and do most of those hours in your state, so you don't have to come to New South Wales for all of that work. And then the third term, while it only does look like 2 subjects, and one of those subjects is still a continuation of the will, then you might still carry on and do some more techniques, the O&M techniques, into that program. So it's a really full but really exciting program. Okay, so the best way to actually visualize all of this, even though we're talking about people that don't have vision, as good vision, is to move into it, to have a look at a video that captures the whole grad dip in 2 minutes. And you'll see what some of the practical hours look like.
The Graduate Diploma in Orientation and Mobility is a 1-year postgraduate diploma that has been designed to provide graduates with the knowledge and expertise to work as orientation and mobility specialists. Offered for the first time at UNSW in 2021, the Graduate Diploma is designed with a program intention to educate students in their home state. Thus, the course content, lectures and tutorials are fully online with face-to-face practical and work-integrated learning components offered in students' home states wherever possible.
Orientation and mobility is the practice of enabling people with low vision or who are blind to know where they are, so that they can get where they want to go and how to travel there in a safe manner. Orientation and mobility specialists work with people of all ages, tailoring interventions to suit the needs of individual clients, including people with additional complexities such as health conditions.
The Graduate Diploma in Orientation and Mobility provides graduates with specialised knowledge of the field and critical and analytical skills to support lifelong learning. It also provides practical experience to enable graduates to apply for industry certification and work as an orientation and mobility specialist, whether self-employed or at an organisation that provides orientation and mobility services to clients with low vision or blindness. The program consists of 8 courses, with a substantial work-integrated learning face-to-face component.
All course content, lectures, and tutorials are fully online and make use of innovative educational technologies, including interactive H5P lessons and animations to engage the learner.
Where possible, practical technique skills are taught through videos and tutorials. The skills demonstrated in the videos are practiced and assessed with face-to-face sessions with qualified orientation and mobility tutors. To find out more, go to unsw.to/orientation and mobility, or email the UNSW School of Optometry and Vision Science at postgrad.optom@unsw.edu.au.
Great, so let's unpack that a little bit, what was said in the video. I'm just going to wait for the slide so that you can see it. There we go. Okay, so let's unpack some of the concepts that were explained to you in the video. So the first thing is that lectures and tutorials are fully online. And that was important because we're providing the only orientation and mobility training that's available in Australia, and we really want to try and support as much of that training happening in different states. And as I said, if we can, in rural. So if there's anyone here interested in doing the program and you live more in a rural location, where we want to support you as much as we can. But as you saw in the video, some of the little video that I showed you, some of the techniques, some of the skills can be learned online, but you do need to do preferably partner work with a technique tutor, and that work does need to be face-to-face. That starts in the middle of the year and progresses right through to the end of the year. So you need to be able to give time for that. You can't be working full-time, but it's really fun and exciting. What happens is the student is actually blindfolded so that they can actually learn the techniques themselves. I do want to note that you might need to travel for a 1 to 3 week teaching block of face-to-face teaching. It might be in New South Wales, or we can try and work a plan for the students to make it a central location. But you might have to travel for a week, up to 3 weeks to New South Wales. And then lastly, the will. Now this is super exciting because we have a very good relationship with the key industry stakeholders, and that will, we're really quite confident to be able to give that in your home state wherever possible. So what is the qualification that you come out with after doing the full year-long grad dip? It's a level 8 AQF level qualification. It takes 1 year, over 3 terms, although we do have some students that are stretching it because they've been working and they're having to do it over more than 1 year, and it comprises those 8 courses that we spoke about. Thanks. With that, you get a qualification from us, a grad dip. But the qualification of orientation and mobilities overseas, they get a certification through ACVREP, and it's actually, they're called COMS, they're called Certified Orientation and Mobility Specialists. And it's actually this qualification that NDIS are using as recognition for someone having those skills as an orientation and mobility specialist. You don't have to do this exam to get our grad dip, but we will make you ready with all the work integrated learning hours and practical hours that you need, and you'll cover all the content, so you're able to sit for this exam. So we would encourage you to do it straight after you've done your grad dip. And we're going to cross now to one of our students, the best way. Courtney's going to tell you about, she's a current student, and she's going to tell you about the course. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and I'm one of the students currently studying the Graduate Diploma in Orientation and Mobility. First of all, congratulations on attending this information session this evening and for taking your first steps for enrolling in this course. It's a really fantastic course. I'm about halfway through it at the moment and we're just about to get into some of our placements, which is really exciting because we're putting all of that information and knowledge that we've learnt into practice. So the first trimester, there is a lot of theory involved and it does come quite fast and thick in the first half of the trimester, but stick with it. You will get through it, and the tutors are really great in helping you learn and understand the knowledge that you need to know. One of the great things about this course is that we are such a small cohort of students, and it's really great because you can bounce your ideas and discussions off each other through the tutorials compared to, say, when you may have done your undergrad at uni with hundreds of people in your course. So that is definitely a pro about this course, that we are quite a small little tight-knit community, and we really help each other through it. So as I said, I'm about halfway through at the moment and I'm about to start my placement soon. So second trimester is a lot more practical based than first trimester, which is, as I said, a little bit more theory based. So we're about to put all our skills into practice now, which I'm really excited for. When I finish this course next year, I'm not sure what direction of O&M I want to go to yet. Originally, I came into this course thinking I might want to go guide dog mobility, but since studying some of the subjects in this course, I've developed a real interest for early childhood and children mobility, so might go down that path. But either way, and whatever direction that your interest is in this field, I think it'll be a really rewarding career, and I highly recommend that you join this course. Thanks very much, and good luck with your studies. Bye.
Thanks so much for that great insight, Courtney. And thank you again to Dr. Sharon Oberstein for your wonderful insights and all of those great information about the program coming up. So just a couple of reminders from me. Make sure you're popping your questions in the chat if you have any about any of the content covered so far, or if we haven't covered something that you were hoping to get answered, please send through those questions in the chat. And just another quick reminder, in the chat is our poll, so we can get to know our audience a little bit better and see if we can answer some questions for you. So welcome to the virtual stage, Associate Professor Juno Kim, who will take you through a masterclass. So a little taster lecture of one of the courses that you will be studying in this course. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Cody. So you heard earlier in one of the videos the importance of perception in orientation and mobility. So I contribute to teaching in one of the courses, Vision 5512, and I'll give you a little taste of the content that you'll experience in that class. So I have this image here, which is always good to start with. It's an ancient Greek version of Juno. You see she's holding a mortar and pestle, and she's wearing these clothes. You can see the definition in shape, all this information about the structure of the statue. If you look behind the statue, there's some brickwork there. There's a whole range of object and structure that we're able to infer from this image. Also, we're able to infer the location of the camera person or observer viewing the statue, standing somewhere to the right of it, right? There are perspective cues contained in the image that allow us to infer that information. So if you think about it from an orientation mobility perspective, just one single image is enough to provide us with a wealth of information. But when you think about it, it's just this big rectangle comprised of luminance variations. But when we look at it, we see so much more. So that's essentially where sensation delineates from perception and why perception is so important. So sensation just refers to how Our senses, for example, our sight transforms physical properties of the environment, like patterns of light, into neural messages. That's where it ends. Perception, on the other hand, is the process of turning those neural messages into meaningful experience and information, right? Recognizing familiar faces or understanding where we are in our visual world. But fortunately, we don't just rely on vision. We have many senses to understand how our world is arranged. So in addition to vision and hearing, we also have the vestibular system. We have inertial sensors in our inner ear that respond to gravity, allow me to sense gravity now so I can sit upright and deliver this content to you. We also have touch, taste and smell. You probably wouldn't really think that taste and smell are relevant to an orientation and mobility scenario of any kind, but you'll find out if you enroll in the course just how valuable these senses also are. But tonight we're just going to focus on this masterclass on just the first three, where we have vision, hearing and the vestibular system. So visually speaking, we see by way of light, and the pattern of light that is reflected and projected by objects in our surrounding environment. They generate images on the back wall of our eye. They get flipped upside down and left to right due to the refractive properties of the anterior part of the eye, the front part of the eye, which you'll learn about in the course. So you don't need to worry about it tonight. All I want you to do is just focus on the very back part where we have the sensory tissue of the retina, where we have these photoreceptors that contain visual pigments that respond to light. So when light strikes these photoreceptors, which contain visual pigments, it generates a chemical reaction, which then generates neural messages that travel outwards away from the back wall. And you can see this dense network of connective neural tissue, where at the very end we have these ganglion cells, shown in blue at the very top, that are essentially integrating information across these neighbouring photoreceptors. So essentially the integration of information across pixels in the image that we are looking at doesn't begin in the brain. It begins right here in the eye as soon as the image hits the back wall. And that information is sent off to the brain through this optic nerve, which exits through this hole on the back of the eye. And because there's a hole, there are no photoreceptors there, so you're essentially blind. You can verify that for yourself if you just cover your right eye and in the next slide view this white strip and look at the point there on the far right. You'll notice that at some point along it, that image of that coin will appear to vanish. It's at that point that the image vanishes that the coin's image is being presented to the blind spot in your back of your eye. So if you have a look at the next slide, you'll see a retinal photograph, and on the right here we have the blind spot where we have no photoreceptors. So essentially blind. You're not walking around the world all the time noticing that you are carrying this visual defect, because it gets filled in by your brain and the power of your brain. And people who have perhaps very large areas of visual field loss due to disease may not even know that they're blind until they're in their teens, and they've been carrying this affliction since birth, right? Because of the immense power of filling in that occurs in the back part of our brain. All right, so you're going to learn about this in the course, but what I want you to focus on next is just how we can see using that part that receives the image of what we're actually looking at, the fovea, where we have cone photoreceptors. So the three types of cone photoreceptors that we use to sense the image, S, M and L cones. S corresponding to the shorter range of the light spectrum of visible light, ranging from 400 nanometers all the way up to about 700 nanometers. But you can see that based on the pigments that they contain, they have different absorption for different wavelengths. So S cone is sensitive to the shorter wavelength bluish hues, the M cone is sensitive to the middle wavelengths, and the L cone is sensitive to the longer wavelengths. So the collective responses of these three cone types can code for any hue that we can see in the rainbow, as also non-spectral hues as well. So those things like pink and magenta. And just to demonstrate that, if we take natural light, white light, which contains equal amplitudes of short, medium and long wavelengths altogether, and reflected off this red apple, the pigments in the skin of this apple actually absorb some of the short and medium wavelengths and reflect proportionally more of the longer wavelengths. And it's part of the retina that receives the image of this red apple that will undergo a pattern of stimulation where the L cone will be most activated and the M cone a bit less and the S cone least. And that will denote the long wavelength hue of this red apple, which will be different to the signature response that you would get if you looked at yellow bananas or a green capsicum or something like that. But it just shows how within the eye itself, we are performing a marvelous amount of integration about the structure of the image and color variations. But it's not enough to sort of differentiate, say, between a red apple and a red can of soft drink, right? We need to process information about shape for that. So in order for that to happen, we need to get that information to the back part of our brain. So if we take our visual field, which is essentially separated into two hemifields, the left side of the brain processes information about the right hemifield. The right side of the brain processes information about the left hemifield. And the reason you get this crossing over is because the image gets not only flipped upside down, but also left to right. So everything to the left of where you're looking at projects to the right side of the retina in both eyes. And it's the right side of the retina in both eyes that will project to the right side of the brain. And that lateralization is preserved from the thalamus, where we have the LGN, which performs a bit more processing and then sends that information on to the primary visual cortex, where a lot of the magic really starts to happen. So there's cells found there that are actually able to pull out the orientation and arrangement of lines and edges in the image that you're actually looking at. So we're performing more complex feature detection. But it's not until beyond V1 that we have two main pathways outside it that we are able to establish more information that is relevant to our perception. So we have this ascending dorsal where pathway, which tells us where objects are and how they relate to us and spatially, and this descending ventral pathway, which contains cortical regions or brain regions that tell us what things are, recognizing the color and form of objects, as well as identifying familiar faces even. So there's a center in the brain called the fusiform face area that is able to provide us with face recognition and object recognition. So we're going to go through these. So I'm going to start with V4. So we have a closer look at it. It's just say in V4, we're getting this image coming in from V1, an initial line drawing of the scene. But we know this scene is actually filled in with color, and it would look something more like this under white light illumination. In the upper right, we have a blue painting. In the lower right, we have a red painting. And if we take screen captures of the little local regions in those images, you see that in the upper right, we have, as you'd expect, a short wavelength bluish hue. And in the lower right, we have a longer wavelength reddish hue. So it's agreeing with that, what we perceive. That's under white light illumination. But if we now change the illuminant from white light to heavy yellow illumination, we end up with a different situation. The paintings still look like they are blue and red, but just now bathed in heavy yellow illumination. But if we take screen captures of them, you'll see that in fact, those local regions are now more of a middle wavelength hue in the upper right and more of a middle wavelength orange hue in the lower right. But you don't see it necessarily as green and orange, you see it as blue and red, because your brain in these parts of your brain in the ventral stream are essentially computing this information that's incoming, trying to infer what is the color of the light source and discounting it from the effects that it would have on the image structure and what the cones are telling you, right? So we don't listen to what the cones are telling us to make a perception of the world. We rely on this higher level processing that provides us with color constancy, the ability to recognize colors invariantly across different lighting environments. It doesn't just work for identifying objects, but also understanding our self-motion in the environment, which is also involving three-dimensional characteristics. So when we move through the world, we generate optic flow, visual motion that essentially tells us where we're moving. And there's an example of this in the upper left here. It's like this, we have this radial expanding and contracting pattern of visual motion, but you don't see it as such. You see it as like it's simulating self-motion in depth. This animation is it works a bit better when it's at a higher frame rate. But you've probably seen this before with your Windows screensaver, where you have those radially expanding patterns that make you feel like you're actually moving in depth, right? So we rely on this information, and we have parts of our brain that are responsible for processing this information about our self-motion. And you can look at the brain activity that occurs here. We get activity not only in V1, but also these auxiliary regions corresponding to area MT, the medial temporal area, and neighboring MST, your medial superior temporal area. There are other parts of the brain that are also activated that basically compute this information from 2D retinal motion to inferring our self-motion in a 3D world. And you can see just how different this is to, say, just taking a checkerboard, alternating the illuminance from black to white, We get activity in V1 because there's visual stuff happening, but we don't get activity in these auxiliary regions because the motion is ambiguous. So we have these centres that help us process this information to understand perceptually what's happening in our environment and where we're moving. Right. But what about if you are someone who has low vision or someone who's completely blind? You can't rely on this information. But fortunately, there are other things you can rely on. For example, the vestibular system, which receives its input from the inner ear. There are inertial sensors that allow us to sense angular and linear head accelerations in space. So here we have the labyrinth. We have 3 semicircular canals oriented orthogonal to one another, and they are able to tell us angular head rotations. And we also have otoliths housed in the main vestibule, which also includes the cochlea, which tells us information about linear head acceleration. So we have a closer look at these anatomical structures. You see at the base of these semicircular canals, we have this enlargement forming this duct, where we have this big paddle or cupula protruding into that duct. This duct is filled with fluid, a special fluid called endolymph that remains stationary as we rotate our head. So it's that relative motion of the stationary fluid and our moving or rotating head that generates inertia against that cupula, deflecting it in one way or the other, bending those underlying hair cells to generate neural messages about that angular head acceleration. A very similar situation is shown there on the right for the otoliths. We have, again, these hair cell receptors that impale now this gelatinous membrane upon which we have these calcium carbonate crystals of otoconia. And when we engage in a linear head acceleration, we generate a force in the opposite direction, and that causes that otolithic membrane, that gelatinous membrane, to be displaced, bending the underlying hair cells, generating neural messages about that linear head acceleration. So we can rely on these systems, a vestibular system, to tell us when we're moving. But there are some limitations associated with it, because it only tells us when we're moving in a way that generates an acceleration. It doesn't tell us when we're moving at a constant velocity, and it doesn't tell us about the organization of other objects in our environment. Fortunately, we can rely on hearing for that if we don't have vision. Of course, we have 2 ears, so we can use our binaural hearing to work out where objects that might be producing sound are located relative to us. So any sound producing objects or sound source will generate concentric waves, sound pressure waves that move outward according to these concentric waves. And they'll actually reach one ear before they reach the other, and also generate a sound shadow such that the intensity of sound that reaches the ear oriented away from the sound source will be quieter than the ear oriented towards that sound source. So we look at this more numerically. You can see that for interoral time differences, we're actually able to compute. Our brain can actually compute these very, very fast computations of working out which way a sound is coming from in the order of just being at about 600 microseconds. Amazing, right? But it only works for low frequency sounds, sound pressure modulations that are much broader than the width of our head. It's unambiguous which direction they're coming from. But if we have higher frequency sounds where the sound pressure modulations are much narrower and than the width of our head, then it's ambiguous. But fortunately, we can rely on this alternative strategy of using the sound shadow and interoral intensity differences to work out where those sounds are located, because high frequency sounds, as you can see here, generate a very strong sound shadow. We can also use information about these flappy bits of cartilage on the side of our head that filter sound, the spectral frequency of sound, to work out whether objects that are producing sound are in front or behind us or above or below us. So we can use these strategies together to work out where sounds are coming from in 3 dimensions. It really is remarkable, but there are animals that can do this as well. All binaural hearing animals can pick up on and use these cues to pick up on and localize where sounds are coming from. And some organisms, like bats, for example, they can see. They just tend not to rely on vision in many situations, like when they're flying around at night. They can use echolocation to get a mental image of the acoustic environment. So when a bat is flying, essentially what it's doing is generating the high-pitched screech that you hear them produce, this call, which generates a sound wave that travels outward away from that bat and will reflect off solid objects distributed in the environment. It's that reflected or echoed sound of low volume or low amplitude, there's quiet reflected echoes, that will travel back towards the bat, and the bat can use its binaural hearing of interoral time and intensity differences, just like humans, to work out where those echoes are coming from. So using them to essentially form generating acoustic image of the surrounding environment, not just where objects are, but how they might be moving as well, because sound sources that move towards or away from the listener will either compress or stretch out those sound waves over space, and in doing so will generate a Doppler shift. Okay, so if a bat issues a call of a particular frequency or pitch and travels outwards, reflects or echoes off an object, and it comes back as a higher or lower pitch, it knows that that object is in that direction and it's moving towards or away from it. Okay, this is echolocation, and it's simply marvelous just how bats can do it, but humans can do it too. So you can actually train people to do this very effectively, irrespective of whether they are seeing or non-seeing. People are equally good at learning to do this, and performance really depends on the trainer and the trainer's ability to coach people in how to do this. Okay, so think about it from an orientation and mobility instructor perspective. You know, if you have an opportunity to teach people to do this effectively, just how valuable a resource would that be to them? Okay, so the evidence suggests from studies that if you take sounds that are representative of an acoustic environment, acoustic layout of objects in the scene using echolocation, and play them to the ear canals of people who are well trained in echolocation, you get activity in the back part of the brain corresponding to sort of visual areas. When you play exactly the same sounds to people who are untrained, you don't get this activation. It's simply marvelous just how this associative learning that is developed neurally through training can lead to these very large differences in brain activation. So it is true that if you're well trained in echolocation, that you do form essentially a mental image of the surrounding environment, and it's very valuable for essentially supplementing any vision you may have left, and perhaps even helping you if you can't see it all. So the take-home points from tonight, just a very brief taster, is that our brain perceives the world through multiple senses. Different senses have different complementary sources of information that they can provide us with about the world. So integrating information across different senses will not only optimize our perceptual performance, but also improve our performance in orientation and mobility scenarios that depend on those percepts. There are some studies here which I've included. These are all open access. You can access these. They sort of give you an idea of the level of content that is going to be delivered in the course, and these specific papers cover the concepts that I've covered in this brief masterclass. So thanks very much for joining, and I'll spin it back to Cody.
I absolutely enjoyed that masterclass myself, so I hope you guys learnt quite a lot with us there too. So I will jump right in now on some admissions and intake information. So all of our applications can be accessed through UNSW Apply Online through the website in that slide. So our entry requirements are that students must hold a recognised undergraduate bachelor's degree, so that's an AQF 7 in any discipline, or a higher university qualification, and they must obviously meet those minimum entrance requirements to UNSW Sydney. And we can award 50% of the course for prior learning. So if you've done courses in vision science or any other health science, then they may be relevant and can be awarded in that sort of recognition of prior learning. So the upcoming intake is Term 1 2022, and the on-time applications close on the 30th of November. So we've still got a good month for you to get those in. And the start date is Valentine's Day, 14th of February 2022. And now I would like to welcome back to the virtual stage Sharon and Juno to answer some of your questions that you've been popping in the chat, which has been absolutely awesome. So we will head first to Sharon, question from Helen. Apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly, Helen. So, hi, Dr. Oberstein. You mentioned that it's better to not work full-time during the diploma, but is there a way I can stretch the course for longer than a year while still working 4 days a week. So we've had a couple of similar questions. David is looking on reducing his work from 5 days to 3 days. And then Linda, along the same lines about full-time work. So I guess, Sharon, if you could just clarify for us and answer those few questions about how possible it is for students to work full-time, or how many days a week do you think it would be possible for the students to work and study this course?
I apologise, everybody. I was on mute. I hope you can hear me now. Thanks, Cody. Thanks for that question. It's a very real question. We really do understand that most of this cohort are working. You're all working. It's a postgraduate study. Funny enough, we actually had a meeting today. I'm sorry, I'm taking a bit of a long way to answer this, because we actually had a meeting, today to best support our students. We did find that a student that was working full-time struggled with the load. So definitely for T1, working 3 days a week, I think you probably will be able to manage. You'll have to do some work on the weekend, but working 3 days for the first term, you can cope with the content. The problem is that we do need to make sure that we can support you with the practical hours and the work integrated learning hours. So there in the term 2 and 3, we just want you to be warned that you will need probably to give us at least 3 days a week minimum. So you could probably still work 2 days a week, but you just need to keep in mind that it is a long course. So that's the minimum you can work. The other part of the question was, can you stretch the course? And we've actually got 2 students doing that now. So we're very, very keen to work with you. The best thing would be to email us and make contact. Either emailing myself or Gail, who is our coordinator. I think Juno will give you the address now for the postgraduate link, or that link that you gave previously is probably the best place to email. But we have done it for a current student. It will take you 2 years then if you stretch it, but we're prepared to do that, I think.
Awesome. We'll just get our colleague Ali to pop that email link in the chat for everyone if they want to reach out. So the next question, let's have a look here. Juno, do you want to tackle this one? I am interested in Biopic Driving for orientation and mobility training. I'm also interested in emerging technologies. Is there any insights you can provide to that, Juno?
Yeah, definitely. There's there's definitely a lot that is being developed in the space. I'm not familiar specifically with what's happening in the space of biopic driving. Actually, Sharon is probably the best person to tackle that specific technology, but definitely with technology being developed, just on people's iPhones and other smart devices, the ability to provide accessible assistive tools is just increasing, and it's just going to have the power to explode, especially when we have essentially the ability to essentially transform visual information into other multisensory information that can be used for example, just as an example, there's a lot of stuff that's been done in converting visual information to stimulation of the tongue to provide an indication of how the visual layout might be structured. But I think for biopic driving in particular, I think Sharon, you might want to add something.
Juno knows that it's a little bit of a passion of mine, so thank you for the question. And emerging technologies is very important. That's why I even brought that up in one about the program outcomes in terms of the profession of orientation and mobility for for one of our learning outcomes. So to get back to Biopic Driving, Biopic Driving is supported by orientation and mobility specialists. The Biopic Driving program is supported by orientation and mobility specialists in overseas countries like the US and the Netherlands, where they have Biopic Driving programs. As a result, I've been very excited to be able to teach that into this program. I've actually just finished teaching it in this term that we've just had, and it teaches into the rehab course. As well, we have teachers on emerging technology, and we have guest lecturers, a lot of subject matter experts teaching into the program. The whole program is not about Biopic Driving at all. The program is not about driving. The orientation mobility program is really teaching people that have got visual impairment or who are blind to be independent and to walk around independently. So there's not as such any straight teaching or education about driving, but there most definitely is about being independent by walking on foot. And then what would be involved if you wanted to go onto that and become like a little bit more expertise or a little bit more interest, you would need to self-study that. So become a driving specialist, for example, a driving instructor, and take those kind of things more. For example, I hope you don't mind me talking, but there's another area of orientation and mobility specialty where a lot of instructors in Australia have got great expertise, and that's in neurological scanning. And it just talks so beautifully to what Juno taught earlier, where they learn about when someone loses half their visual field, and they learn to teach someone to scan into a lost field. So there are lots of areas of expertise. So neurological scanning is one area of orientation and mobility specialty. That's an expert area, and so is Biopic Driving an expert area. But we've introduced you to everything in the program.
Yeah, I think just building on that, I think you can use with developing technologies in virtual reality and augmented reality. We can essentially know where people are looking. We could essentially provide them with feedback on, how their gaze patterns might be changing. Also, we can use virtual reality as a way to provide training to people and look at how visual information supplements vestibular information for navigating through our environment, and how profoundly important that residual visual motion actually is. Even if you are cortically blind, you can still respond to visual motion, essentially. But virtual reality is definitely something to consider.
100%. Cody, I think you might be on mute. Sorry. There we go.
There we go. Thank you so much, both of you, for that really in-depth answer. The emerging technologies and the way that orientation and mobility is moving towards the future is really exciting. And for those who are still interested, we might just stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes after the end time, as we've got a lot of questions coming through. So if you don't mind, I'll just answer a couple really quickly here. Will we be providing the recording? Yes. So we will get that out by the end of the week. We'll upload a link to the recording. So we won't send the slides out, I'm sorry, Lisa. However, you will have access to the recording, so the full event from tonight, and you'll be able to slide forward or back depending on what you want to catch up on. So we have a question from Linda. I wanted to check about the qualification or registration at the end of the course. I got confused with the Oz versus AU exam, and is there an exam to sit for an Australian qualification? So Sharon, would this be best for you?
Yes, I'm happy to handle that question. So when you qualify with the Graduate Diploma in Orientation and Mobility from UNSW, you qualify with a Graduate Diploma, and you can work as an Orientation and Mobility Specialist in Australia, definitely. Different countries, we'd have to, that's on a case-by-case basis, but definitely in Australia. But it's I don't know if anyone here is medical, but the medical, like for example, optometry is governed by the medical health medical board, whereas orientation and mobility specialty is not. So as a result, in order to get certified, if you wanted to have that extra certification and then be able to work anywhere basically in the world as an orientation and mobility specialist, you then write another exam. It's a choice, you don't have to write it, but we will make you ready to write it. And we recommend that you go on to write it because you're going to have all the knowledge and all the hours. You have to accumulate all these hours of wool, which we're going to lay out for you in a nice little package. So once you've got all of that, we'd strongly recommend that you go write the exam. The exam that I've heard is not that overwhelming. You'll be fully prepared to do it after our course. And what it is, you get a practice exam, you get a chance to practice at it, so you get used to it, and then it's a multiple choice exam, and then you just have to give them evidence of all your hours. Now, why is it a good idea to get certified? Well, possibly if you want to work all over the world, that might be one option. But the other reason is that the NDI organisations like Guide Dogs, Vision Australia, will definitely employ you as an orientation and mobility specialist when you come out of our program. They've told us that, and they're going to be they're working with us as partners to give you will placement. So they're going to be happy to take you on. But if you wanted to work on your own privately and you want to get claim from the NDIS have seen that getting this certification from overseas is their way of making sure that you're good enough. Yes, we may work with them to get recognition just for the grad dip, but we quite like the idea that our program is so high and of such a good level that you're all ready to write the certification exam from overseas. And also one more thing, sorry, I know I'm talking such a lot, but we're working very closely with the profession. With the Association for Orientation and Mobility Specialists is OMA, it's called OMA, O-M-A-A, and their recommendation is that they would like us to give you the grad dip and make you ready to write that certification as well. So we're looking to the profession for that advice.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Sharon. We've had quite a few questions coming through on the CSP, so those Commonwealth supported places, and whether or not they've been allocated yet, or if the course is available for CSP places. Sharon, do you have any information on that, or would it be best for students to reach out directly?
So I can definitely answer that we have 13 CSP places definitely approved. However, they haven't been allocated yet, no. And Cody, as you said, it's actually out of my control. It's a university, so I'll let you answer the rest of that part of how they get allocated, those exact places.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they haven't been allocated yet, then absolutely you should apply for those places, and just make sure that your applications are in by that 30th of November for those places to be allocated. So we will move on, and sorry, just one more thing. It is based on competitiveness for those places, so just keep that in mind. So we have had a question, is this course likely to continue to run in the future? This person has 2 years left of their undergrad degree, so they'd be looking to study it in 2024. Do we see this course continuing in the future?
Thanks, Cody. I hope you don't mind, Juno. I'm going to jump in here. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is the amount of work that I have done, that Juno has done, that CQ has done. We have done a ton of work here. We have industry support, and we have the most amazing interest, like unbelievable interest. The profession needed this. It needed to move away. I'm not sure if anyone knows here, but the way that orientation and mobility specialists were trained previously was kind of more in-house. You got a job at one of the main stakeholders, the main industry stakeholders, and they would support you to train, and they were responsible for the course. And that wasn't viable. That wasn't financially a good model. So this is now a model moved to UNSW. We are supported by UNSW, by the School of Optometry and Vision Science. We have funding. You can see we have a big infrastructure, and we have now prepared a lot of the content and done a lot of the groundwork. So most definitely, this course is definitely going to run. If we find that we've got a ton of market, I mean, we already have, a lot of applicants. It's becoming quite competitive for next year, I will tell you, so get your applications in, but we will be able to defer for the next year if you can't. The profession have spoken to us and they've said to us, would there be an option where you would consider, we also don't want to we're not going to just accept everybody because we don't want to flood the market with too many orientation mobility specialists. Also, we also want to make sure that we can give you your super duper practical and will hours. We have to give you those quality hours, so we're very committed to that as well. So saying that, the course is definitely going to run. There is a chance that in 4 years' time it will run every second year. There is that consideration, but it will definitely run again, definitely for the next 5 years without doubt.
Yeah, I
That's
think it's
awesome.
good to add that when you have these new programs like this, you got more people coming into this space, thinking in this space, and you get more diversity, like assistive technologies. That's through these programs, these areas explode. So the field doesn't just get narrower, it just becomes a lot more diverse. So the opportunities that will be available to you further in the future will be actually much broader. So that's something to think about, especially if you're really interested in something like a research pathway beyond that program as well. But it's definitely a very valuable thing to consider if you want to really take things to the next level with engaging with industry.
Perfect. Thanks for those answers. Just touching again on that work integrated learning opportunities. Sharon, how many hours of work integrated learning are there included in the program? And maybe you could give us some examples of where students are heading this coming term for their work integrated learning component of their program.
Thanks, Cody. So I'd love to. So the first part of your question, I kind of forgot what you said. Can you just repeat the very first part? I know I'm about to tell you where they're all headed to. Oh, how many hours?
How many hours? Yeah.
I got so excited with where they're going that I forgot the question. 350 hours you need of work integrated learning hours to register for comms for that overseas exam. But of those 350 hours, only 100 of them don't have to be face-to-face. In other words, 100 are part of meetings that you have in the organisation or preparing reports. So it's 250 hours of face-to-face. Now, that might sound like a lot, but when you do a block of 4 weeks, which is what we're doing now, we're thinking of doing a block of 4 weeks of work, which is why I wanted you to think about the working full-time. That goes quite quickly. It adds up super quickly. What we're doing at the moment, actually, with our world placement, when Courtney told us she's about to start, we're actually offering it. We're letting the students work 2 days, and we're letting them do 3 days. So we are trying to work with students, but I can't promise that always because it is a full-time course. Where are they going? So we're quite committed to making sure that you have a placement at more than one organisation. So we have looked at the key stakeholders in this space, and granted that our current students are in New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria. So the key organisations in those places are between Guide Dogs and Vision Australia. So we're looking at Guide Dogs, Vision Australia and privately. However, when we have students in other states, then we will look at the organisations like the Royal Society for the Blind and Visibility. Those are the other stakeholders, the key stakeholders. So you get to work in the most, most dynamic places where they're doing the most amazing rehabilitation work, and you actually see it happen. Also, I have to say that it's a great door in to, which I think Cody mentioned already, but it's a great door in way to get a job, both for the organisation. That's why they offer the world, because they want to attract you to work for them, but also for yourself to make relationships and get a job, and that's why it works.
Thanks so much for that, Sharon. I'm sure they are all super excited about getting out there and working with some real clients and patients in the real world. So we have time for just one more question, but I will cover off some more of that CSP information. So just making sure that the CSP allocation is automatic based on competitiveness. So you just need to apply for the program. My colleague Ali is going to post a link in the chat about the CSPs, so for the generic UNSW information. But if you have some really specific questions, it would be best to email the school about that information. And any questions that we haven't got to tonight, you can reach out to the school directly, so pg.optom@unsw.edu.au, and they will be able to answer the questions. So I'll just start with Juno, and then we'll finish off with Sharon after that. So Juno, what is your favourite part of teaching into this program, and why do you think it's important to be part of the School of Vision Science and Optometry?
For the students to be part of the school, or for me to be part of the school? So I'll give you an idea, because my background is actually in vision science. So I conduct research using technology to essentially disintegrate different senses. And through doing so in my research, and the students I teach within the program show how we can use technology to essentially understand how our perception of the world is a multisensory one, and what happens if you were to, say, take out one or stop one of those senses from contributing to that multisensory experience. So there are lots of examples of things that we go through, things like redirected walking. These are all the kind of really exciting kind of hands-on things. It's hands-on. It has been with remote teaching, but hopefully this will be more of a face-to-face experience or hybrid experience moving forward. But really seeing how it's not that hard to introduce some technology into situations so that we can sort of make sense of how different sources of information contribute to our experience of the world, and working out where we are and how we should be moving. And this does feed into things like rehabilitation, and has scope for understanding other aspects of assessment, even in gait, and understanding how people just move, understanding human movement in general. So there are many different applications, and if you think about it like that, orientation and mobility is a very broad concept, but ultimately it begins with perception, and understanding perception, we can understand how we engage with the world through our motor activity. So I think that's probably the aspect that I enjoy the most, and that's where I fit into the school, is to show that our experience of the world is in not just what meets the eye, but what happens in the brain, and what happens if integrating all these other sensory sources of information. When we look at something, we don't just see what it is. We don't just see some silk and just know that it is a wavy shape and as a particular color. We actually see it as though we're feeling it. We actually have this experience, a visual experience, is sort of a very emotional experience that is tied into what we know and have learned about that object from through other senses. So I think it's really important to understand, especially when we cover things like safety, for example, which is very important, because it's really is a high level degree of processing where we assess our environment and the safety of our environment. Yeah, but I could talk all day about research pathways for developing new ideas. So yeah, there's a lot of scope in research in this area, and that's definitely what I'm excited about. And hopefully students would like to get engaged with that and have a look at some of the things we do. You're quite welcome if you're ever in town, just to make a time, and I can show you the lab and you can see what we do.
Thanks so much, Juno. And just heading over to Sharon quickly, what do you think is the most rewarding part of teaching into this program?
So just listening to Juno gives you a perfect example of why I love working where I work, because I've always got someone down the passage. COVID hasn't really, it's made a bit of a bit of a virtual passage, but there's always someone to discuss things and bounce ideas off. For me, although I've done my research, and actually I did my research on biopic driving, and so it was connected with orientation and mobility. Research is only a part of my passion. My passion is most definitely the teaching. I love the teaching, and I love teaching and working in the clinic. I mean, I spend a lot of time working with patients in the clinic. We call them patients in optometry. Orientation and mobility specialists call them clients more. And then working with a multidisciplinary, and I'm a strong believer that working with people that have got low vision or blindness needs to come from a multidisciplinary perspective. And how better for me to be able to work with and help teach those people that I'm going to refer to. So the fact that I've been able to teach some of the content that orientation and mobility specialists take on in terms of what they do, what they hear from an optometrist and how they apply that, and similarly how they have maybe to give me back, maybe refer back to me, just that I've been able to contribute to that whole pathway that we're trying to get these people that have got disability access to service. For me, I feel like I'm making a difference, and that's why I love it. I love the passion of the teaching. I like the idea that I'm making a difference, that maybe where I'm going to help train an orientation and mobility specialist that's going to be able to help a person that lives rurally, that is blind, and to get them independent. That's what I love about it.
That's awesome, and it sounds like the program is going to make a real impact in not only the students that you're both teaching, but also the lives of so many around Australia. So unfortunately, that is all we have time for this evening. If you would like to connect with us, stay in the loop about any of our upcoming events, you can connect with us. Just reach out to our future student advisors at any time if you have any questions, or of course you can reach out to the postgrad optometry team as well. So thank you again to Juno and Sharon for all of your wonderful insights into the program and for giving us that taster lecture. And thank you to all of our attendees for coming along tonight.
You're the person the world needs. Life is changing, and the future is uncertain. You may not know how or why yet, but you know you're here to make a difference. You're not waiting for the universe to give you the answers. You're finding them for yourself. Challenging echoes with evidence. Few people have great ideas. Even fewer make them happen. It takes a dreamer, an explorer, a researcher, a leader, a thinker. It takes someone like